Welcome to Intuitive Art Sales. This is the show where I, Jessica Craddock, am going to teach you how to source your art marketing from within. You're going to practice claiming that authentic art business that you want and leading into the most natural way for you to get there. You're going to learn to get connected to your intuition, your confidence, and your community so that you can sell your art consistently while holding strong boundaries on your work-life balance. This week I'm talking with Nikkita Cohoon. She's a multimedia artist who makes vibrant artwork with lots of mark making that feels like a chatty conversation. And today we're really digging into the question, what happens when I'm at a process in my business where I just need to go inward, I need to winter, I need to explore some ideas, give myself some time, and when do I know it's the right time to move out of that and into the execution of these ideas? How do I use my own intuition and knowing to be able to make those choices and know which way is the right way to go next? If you're someone who loves this inner reflection period and you can kind of tend to get stuck in it or get overwhelmed with ideas, this is the episode for you. So with that, let's get into it. Hi, Nikkita.
Hi, Jessica.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, especially because I get to be with you today. We haven't gotten to chat in a little while, so
it has been a minute and I have missed you. So thank you for doing this with me. Okay, so we want to talk a little bit about how you are starting to claim artist again instead of just designer. Not just designer, but separating the two terms is, I think, how you described it, where I'm a designer or I'm an artist, but they aren't necessarily the same thing, but how you're starting to explore how they are. Tell me a little bit about what's going on.
Yeah, I stopped taking clients for my brand design business in the fall, which was a big shift for me. I started my business in 2013, and it's always been some form of freelance, then moving into my own studio, working with clients one-on-one and really expressing their visual brand identity. And all along I was creating for myself, but that was kind of the end of it. It was a personal practice. And so during that time, I often led with the role of designer because I was serving other clients first.
Mm-hmm.
And that felt really good. It still informed my creative practice and really inspired it as well. There's a lot of creative collaboration that happens, and then my own work is impacted in wonderful ways because of that. But I started full-time working for someone else in the fall outside of my business for the first time since 2012, maybe. So it was just one too many containers. So now my day job is creative, but not visually creative. And that means I can get creative inspiration and little sparks during the day, but I'm not visually expressing that for someone else. And I get to keep that for myself. It feels really freeing and exciting. And it also takes some pressure off of what does that look like on the day to day. If it's just for me, I don't have to have that. I can just show up and it can shift. And that's how I am anyway when I talk about the difference between routine and ritual. Routine is something you have to do or that you build in, and it has to happen and get checked off. Whereas ritual is something, it may happen daily, but it's something that feels really aligned and good for you. So I'm constantly reinventing there. That means that even though I've had that designer hat on and I still considered myself an artist, even things that I would create, I'd be like, well, that's more of a design. I do surface pattern design as well. So it has that in the name. And sometimes people will consider that, well, they say it's commercial, so it's not art. But we know it's all art. It's just the way it comes through. And I'm really stepping into that in this season.
I love it. Nikkita actually, was it a couple of years ago? It must have been because it was for Anchored Artist and it's called Consistent Income now. It's been that way for a while. So she came in and did a masterclass called Routine to Ritual, Creating Daily Energetic Practices. And it was so good and I loved it. And it's actually stored in the Artist Market Treasury. If you have access to that, you should go watch it after you listen to this interview because you're really going to enjoy it. Nikkita's really great at many things, but one of those things is breaking down the ideas that she was just talking about, the rituals versus routine, and how do we find more of those rituals that energize us? And I love it. So now you said you're kind of working on finding freedom in your own creative rituals, but also knowing when to dig in a little bit more and make it not just for yourself, but something that you might share, or when to go bigger, and knowing when to take action on all those ideas, and when is the time to get out of winter and maybe into spring. Let's dig into that, shall we?
Yeah, let's do it because I can feel it. It's on the horizon, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even February from January, it's February as we're talking, and there's a different shift. I'm in the Midwest. January is so gray, and you can see here I have so much sun in my studio today, and that would not have been the case even a week ago. So there's just a
Right.
palpable shift of absolutely, it's still cold. There's still those lots of quiet moments, but spring is on the horizon, even if we have to wait a little bit for it. We're aware of it, it's in the periphery.
I like to talk to my clients. Sometimes we get into it, and sometimes it kind of gets shifted to this side about seasons of energy. And you're talking about as they relate to the actual outdoor season. And I think that there's a lot to that.
Mhm.
Sometimes, no, not sometimes, all the time for me, winter feels I want to go in, I want to explore my ideas, I want to do less. I want to be more in tune with whatever's going on for me. And I feel like that's what you're describing. What are you exploring?
Yeah, it's an interesting season, winter. I am an idea person, and I can get really stuck in my head, and I like the winter season, both the real one and just, like, in that cycle you're in
Mm-hmm.
creatively of that permission to just stay there, go inward, be with it, and it's interesting, even this Sunday, I had all these ideas of things I wanted to do. I wanted to write my newsletter. I have one lingering client project that I was like, well, I should work on that. I could open my sketchbook. And I sat with those feelings for hours and
Mm.
knew all these things I could. I could sense it, but I was like, no, I'm not. I'm wintering. I read my book and I stayed still. By the end of the day, I had opened my sketchbook. January, I decided I was going to come back to a daily creative practice, but it wasn't January 1st. It was like January 31st. So for the whole month, I knew you're coming to that. You're coming to that. When you feel called in this time, you can explore what that looks like. So not the daily practice right away, but this past week, that's returned. So that's the one thing I've been holding to, and then the rest I can just notice and be aware of. And I like my sketchbook practice even for noting some of those things of I felt I should do this or I
Mm.
wanted to do that. Julia Cameron, one of my favorite writers, who the author of The Artist Way, she encourages writers to write a certain amount of time or a certain like have a certain practice each day. And she always encourages that you like she'll do a page limit, for example, and you don't necessarily go beyond the 3 pages for your morning pages. She talks to writers about how it's better to stop when you still have that sense of potency that you could keep going because it
Mm.
really charges when you come back to the page the next day. And so I like that balance of, you know, not just going completely still, taking some action, but also having that constraint of knowing when to stop and leaving yourself little breadcrumbs for when you return the next time. So I've been enjoying kind of noting things along the way and journaling my way even through some of my visual stuff, whether it's in the sketchbook or with a notebook by the side. I like saving those little clues.
Yeah, I love that. I hadn't heard that from her. In my mind, it's just 3 pages, stop. But I do that for myself as well, whether it's through my journal or even I text myself notes all the time. It's my own little breadcrumbs like, oh, don't, I don't want to forget this yet. And I'm not going to sit down and take action on it or write on it or whatever it is, but breadcrumbs. And it makes it so easy to get restarted again. And that has so much value in it because when you create rituals that can become routines, the easier they're a routine, the more you're going to do the ritual.
Yeah. Again, I come back to that idea of containers and constraints. They are so powerful for artists. We think 8 hours of studio time in a clean, fresh studio sounds so alluring, but sometimes it's really intimidating. So when we have
Mm.
these little containers or constraints, they're really comforting and they create that scaffolding for us. The other thing I've been doing since I've been working a lot with collage in my sketchbook is I have this little box of scraps, and I tend to try not, if I'm cutting something up, I leave at least a little bit of that for the next time. And so then there's that through line the next day of I can pick up this scrap that yesterday I cut out the leaf, today it's the shape that was left behind. And so again, it's so conversational for me of like continuing that conversation, that through line from day to day.
You made me want to go leave myself breadcrumbs everywhere on purpose now. I'm going
Yes.
to have to do that. Okay. So when you're talking about these breadcrumbs and these containers and constraints, you're saying, I want to keep digging in. I want to keep taking action on them. But how do I know when they need to become more? Right. So
Yeah.
I know you're here because one, I invited you, and two, you're hoping for me to give you a couple of answers. But sometimes I like the answers that come from within you, and you just need to talk them through with somebody in order to find them.
I'm a big verbal processor, so I'm always here for that.
Hmm. So I kind of feel like that may be where we're going here. So in this practice, how will you know if it needs to become something more, or if the routine of leaving yourself a breadcrumb and writing or drawing every day is still the thing that is needed?
Yeah, I think for a while, it's gonna be the thing that it's needed. I'm really
Mhm.
still pretty fresh into this daily practice, and so I'd like to get at least a good 30 days of finding my stride there. But I think those breadcrumbs, if I am diligent about at least making those notes, that I'm gonna start to get nudges enough that I'll know, "Okay, now this container's too small for you. What does it look like to go a little bit larger?" And I think too, I'm keeping visual clues of I have the big 18 by 24 newsprint pad, I have the new watercolor pad, and I'm not gonna hide them away. They'll be present. And not to overwhelm me, but just so that, they're companions in the studio. They're there waiting for me. On the business side of things, I have this weekly newsletter that I've started. And similarly, I would say in the past couple months, I've been challenging myself to show up close to on a weekly basis. This time it was 8 or 9 days, but it was also one of my best, like one of my favorite ones that I've written so far. So having those constraints, but knowing when to break them, knowing, okay, you need an extra couple days and that's okay. But even when I started that list, I'm on Substack where you have the option to have a private tier for people that upgrade. And I know that I want to do that at some point, create this community where we can continue some of these conversations that aren't just the public newsletter that anyone can stumble on. Because in those private containers, there's an intimacy you can't always have with something that's completely public. So I'm headed there. And when I get into just planning mode, I'm like, well, that'll be natural in the spring. And that's the other thing is sometimes you can push it too soon. And so I'm going to have to feel out if that's too soon or if I need to allow this season to kind of extend longer.
Right.
So
So you said nudges. What do your nudges look like? How do you feel them, see them, hear them? How do they manifest to know I am getting nudges for you?
I think it's always listening. It's that internal monologue, which I've heard there are people that don't have that, but there's always a voice track in my head or a word track of ideas, especially being aware of ones that come up again and again. One of the common ways is regular journaling. I don't journal as much in the winter, in the literal winter, because my hands are too cold and I'm lazy. Not lazy, but I'm allowing myself the full stillness. So I might jot things down here and there. I might type things, which is very anti Julia Cameron morning pages. She says they're never to be typed, but if I
Never.
need to, I'll type.
You
um,
got to do you.
it can be through journaling. I like voice notes. I use Voxer and Note to myself. I have an Apple Watch now, so I like going semi-unplugged on walks, but just record voice notes on my watch if things come to me. And then again,
Yeah.
actually during the creative process, if I don't write it directly on the sketchbook page, I might have a post-it and stick it there, or put a little title at the bottom of some of the nudges or notes that I had along the way.
Okay, so let's just make sure I'm tracking here. Your nudges come in the form of as you are walking, drawing, writing, they're a little idea that pops in and you record them somewhere. Is that so far good?
Yeah.
Okay. Aren't you getting those all the time?
Yes.
Okay, so then when do you say, I need to listen to this one, I need to plan it?
A couple ways. One is if anyone has done morning pages or regularly journaled, you've noticed we can be pretty repetitive with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Things that we think are new ideas, when you look back on what you've journaled, you'll see common themes again and again. So even though it feels new on Tuesday, it was probably there several weeks ago on that Thursday. It's always interesting when you think you've had a new idea and then you realize, no, I've had this idea 20 times before. And so that's a time to pay attention.
Yeah. Okay, so when they start getting repetitive.
Yeah. And I'm also very much a gut person of, even if it might be the first time something's occurred to me, if I feel it in my body and it just won't go away, I'll act on that, even if it's not something that has come up before. And I'm very much the type of person too that once I'm on that track, I will forget that it was this brand new idea or that it didn't have all this history to it, because I just put all that momentum and weight into it.
Okay, so let's say for a second, you've told me just now that you want to make sure you have at least 30 days of ritual, routine. Which word are we using? Ritual.
Yeah.
Ritual as a routine under your belt before any of these nudges can start to take any form. What would you do if A, they started coming hard and fast and you could feel it in your gut tomorrow, or B, well, I guess I know the answer to that one. They didn't come, you just keep doing what you're doing. But what if they started coming tomorrow? What are you going to do?
I think tomorrow would be too soon. So I would get out my trusty bullet journal and put it in my for later list so that it
Mm,
felt contained, but not something I'm going to take action on right away. But if it was not the full 30 days, but a couple weeks, if my gut is pulling me that strong, I'm probably going to go for it.
we recorded this episode in the winter, but now we're moving into spring. And with that, I bet a lot of you are doing the same with your business. Maybe you just spent some time, quote unquote, hibernating, and you have all of these things that you want to bring to the world, but you're not quite sure where to start. If that's the case, I want to make sure you know about a program I will be running shortly. It's lean and mean, and it's called the Money Now for Artists Boot Camp. In just 1 month, we're going to take you from I don't know where to start to building a small but mighty audience full of the right connections, those people who are going to want your art, creating an identity for that art, even if there's a lot of competition in your space, and starting to treat the work you're doing like a business so it can pay you like a business. You're not going to get a bunch of fluff here. This is the most actionable, what do I do next, step-by-step program that I have ever built, and I'm incredibly proud of it. And if that sounds like exactly what you're looking for, go check it out in the show notes. Now let's get back to that conversation. Okay, let's circle back. We are claiming artist again. Designer can be a part of that. We're finding freedom, knowing when to dig in, when to take action. I feel like you have a pretty strong intuition and sense of knowing of that already. But when I asked you earlier, where are you going to get stuck? You said knowing when to dig in. If you feel, as you've described, that you have a process for knowing when to dig in, where do you feel like you're not fully confident in that intuition?
It's more like the business side of things, of once it's time to actually put it out there, to market it, to show up, to like proclaim this thing is going to exist and I'm going to do it. For example, in the past, I've had ideas like that and I put it out there. And knowing when it comes to sharing your work, people have to see things a lot of times before it gains traction because it can be kind of noisy. And if you're someone like me who goes quiet for long periods of time, people have to get used to hearing from you again. A lot of times, if something like that happens, I'll just be like, oh, that was the sign it wasn't the right season for this. And I'll just go quiet. Sometimes on occasion that might be the right thing, but it also just might be that time of this is the time to get louder to actually talk about it because you're not actually helping the people that need to hear about this hear about it because you decided that one time you mentioned it wasn't enough. So,
Yes. Okay. So the question really is not when to dig in and not even when to market it, but when I'm marketing it, how do I know if I should get louder or if I should go back into my hibernating hole?
yeah, I think it's a step before that of if I have followed that nudge, trusting that initial nudge instead of course correcting and going back. But, and I think this next time it'll be different. It really will be like a matter of when is the right time for this. If you think about building an audience, my audience is used to hearing from me more about design. So I do have
Mhm.
that question of how long do they need to see me in this container, just showing up and sharing from that place, and then say, okay, come along with me. Like, do they need a full year of that? Is a few months going to be enough time? And if it's just a few people ready to come along to the ride, like, how do you stay in that too and be okay about it?
Well, first of all, from my understanding, you predict that the container will be something along the lines of creating creative rituals. Is that correct? Let's backtrack for a minute. If you had to predict what the thing you are going to want to market is that your art or is that some sort of container for creative rituals?
Both, I think, but it may be the creative rituals first. I feel like
You know
I
what?
want to
I'm
hold the
gonna I'm
art
gonna
closer
scratch
to
that
me.
question. Let's
Okay.
actually scratch because it doesn't matter. It really doesn't. This whole time you have shown up as Nikkita. You have shared, I like routine. I like creativity. I like rituals. I care about living in tune with my intuition and the seasons of my life. Your art is going to be about that. A container that you're teaching lessons about those things is going to be about that. The label that you put on yourself is designer. But you're not just designer, you're also artist, you're also intuitive, you're also someone who cares about all of those things. Like, that is you, and the way that I have experienced you in the past has not been, "I am a designer, what logo do you want?" Right?
Very true. What we were just talking about with journaling of those nudges, like this idea feels new to me again, but like you said, we had this conversation 2 years ago and it mattered to me then as well. So it's a season of rediscovering that, but I think too acknowledging that it has been here all along. So it's going to feel probably natural, and even I'm getting the nudge right now that it's probably coming sooner than I would plan for myself if I'm really open to it.
Right. So, I don't think it's a question of how long do they have to hear from me in this way. You're still showing up in all of those ways.
Yeah.
You're still emailing hibernating whole.
Yeah, I think it's a step before that of once I if I have followed that nudge, trusting that initial nudge instead of course correcting and going back. But, and I think this next time it'll be different. It really will be like a matter of when is the right time for this. If you think about building an audience, my audience is used to hearing from me more about design. So I do have
Mhm.
that question of how long do they need to see me in this container, just showing up and sharing from that place, and then say, okay, come along with me. Like, do they need a full year of that? Is a few months going to be enough time? And if it's just a few people ready to come along to the ride, like how do you stay in that too and be okay about it?
Well, first of all, from my understanding, you predict that the container will be something along the lines of creating creative rituals slash. Is that correct? Let's backtrack for a minute. If you had to predict what the thing you are going to want to market is that your art or is that some sort of container for creative rituals?
Both, I think, but it may be the creative rituals first. I feel like
You know
I
what?
want
I'm
to hold the
gonna I'm
art
gonna
focus
scratch that
and
question. Let's
okay.
actually scratch because it doesn't matter. It really doesn't. This whole time you have shown up as Nikkita. You have shared I like routine. I like creativity. I like rituals. I care about living in tune with my intuition and the seasons of my life. Your art is going to be about that. A container that you're teaching lessons about those things is going to be about that. The label that you put on yourself is designer. But you're not just designer, you're also artist, you're also intuitive, you're also someone who cares about all of those things. Like that is you. And the way that I have experienced you in the past has not been, I am a designer. What logo do you want? Right?
Very true. And
You've
see
you've
what
been
we were
all of
just
that.
talking about. Yeah, what we were just talking about with journaling of those nudges. Like this idea feels new to me again. But like you said, we had this conversation 2 years ago and it mattered to me then as well.
Right.
So it's a season of rediscovering that. But I think too, acknowledging that it has been here all along. So it's going to feel probably natural. And even I'm getting the nudge right now that it's probably coming sooner than I would plan for myself if I'm really open to it.
Right.
Yeah.
Just a thought. So I don't think it's a question of how long do they have to hear from me in this way. You are still showing up in all of those ways.
Yeah.
You're still emailing, you're still remind me the name of the writing platform you're using.
Substack. Yeah.
You're
It's
still
email.
using Substack. Oh, okay. I don't know. I don't know what Substack is.
No,
I'm gonna be real
that's fine.
honest right now.
It doesn't matter.
You're still using Substack to write emails. So you are not completely hiding. You are just taking time to figure out what's the thing I want to promote, which is
Yeah.
different than being around. So then the question maybe is not how do I know this is the right thing to promote or when do I know when to quit promoting it, but more along the lines of what you said, which was how do I trust myself and let it take shape organically? The idea has come to you, whatever the idea is. Like you said, multiple times, it's coming back for a reason. So then what? Then what's the problem? We know we're trusting ourselves, we're listening to our idea, we're going forward. Where does the problem occur?
I think it's just, I think committing to showing up. I think it's the energy of like, there's always that fear. Many people have that fear of, well, what if I do go all in and only 3 people sign up for
Everyone
the
has
thing?
that fear.
And so I think it's also about what can I offer and still show up wholeheartedly, even if it's those 3 people, instead of just saying, I won't do this if it's only 3 people.
One of the things I like to do is really dig in worst case scenario. which sounds disturbing, but it actually turns out to be very freeing. If you offered a thing and only 3 people bought it, maybe that's not worst case scenario. Maybe worst case scenario is no one buys it. Then what?
I mean, that was the case for me over the summer with an idea I had. And in that time, it worked out just fine because I found I didn't have the right presence and energy with other life things. So I know that sometimes that worst case scenario works out to the better for everyone. It just wasn't the right time. And
Mm-hmm.
those ideas ended up coming through in a different way. So I guess that's just a reminder of it doesn't matter. It's okay.
You maybe needed to experience it not happening in that way so it could continue to take form to its newest way.
Yeah.
I have taught the same thing in my community. I've changed the name of it, but I've taught the same things for like 4 years now. The way that I teach it, the container that I teach it in evolve, but they only evolve because of whatever happens at the start. So I teach something, I learn, yes, people resonate with the idea, but they don't quite know how to execute this part of it. So then I change how I present it a little bit. It's the same thing, but it just keeps evolving and evolving and evolving and evolving and getting better and better and better. It can't evolve and get better until it has been put into the world,
Yeah.
even if nobody bought it. You still had to take the time to think through, what is the thing I'm providing? What does it look like? How do I want to do it? And then you got information. And yeah, sometimes that feels sucky in the moment. But like you just illustrated, you can always look back and go, that needed to happen for me to get to here. And that needed to happen to get to here. And that needed to happen to get to here. It's that journey everyone's always talking about of, this has to happen in order to get here, 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 here. And now I'm here. But now I'm here is never the final place. It just keeps going.
It does.
And I think everyone's trying to get to the final, now I'm here. And it just doesn't really exist as far as I've experienced.
Well, and it would be boring. We can see that in our creative practices more readily. We're not trying to create the same painting or drawing every time.
Right.
And I far more enjoy the process than I care about the final outcome, which is why I haven't been creating any type of collections or works for sale recently because that's been enough in the last couple of years. But I guess for business, we think we have to have it all figured out or we're going a certain place. And even, at first thinking about the fact that I was talking about this with you 2 years ago, I'm like, "Oh, no, I need something new to say," or "I'm one
No.
note," but it's like, no, it's the things we care about, and so there's still people out there that need to hear it, and like you said, we can shift how we deliver it or fine-tune, and that's why I'm drawn to a community as well. I very much like responding to the moment. When I taught a live workshop 2 weeks ago, I thought they wanted demos and they wanted to see how I did a specific thing, but all they really wanted was the time and space and the curated materials to have this exploration together. And I was able to adjust in the moment. And it was really helpful to get that real time feedback and see what people resonated with and to recognize the things that mattered most to me and propel me forward to the next thing. So,
Do you know human design? Excuse me.
yes, a little bit.
Do you know if you're a responder?
Yeah, I am.
I thought so. I am
Yeah.
too. I don't know what the percentages are, but I feel like a lot of people are. But in order to move forward, we have to put it out there to get a response that we can respond to, which sounds weird. But it's something like, the other day I asked my daughter, "Hey, it's snowing outside, but my friend just invited me over, or us over. What do you think? I don't know if I want to go." And she goes, "Oh, I want to go. I want to go. I want to go." And then in that moment, her response to my question made me go, "I really don't want to go. It is snowing. I'm sorry. I just bait and switched you, but we're not going to go." But I wouldn't have known that. I wouldn't have been able to know that had I not put it out there to be responded to. And so I think a big part of your process of getting to whatever the next is having that feedback.
Yeah.
So I think in that way, knowing that can be really helpful for you, because instead of thinking about it as business and it has to reach X goal, you change the goal to, here's my idea, I'm going to trust it. And in order to find out what I need to know about it, I'm going to put it out there so I can get responses, so I can respond in turn. And that is the purpose of sharing it. And it
Yeah.
becomes part of a creative practice. Business can be, depending on how you do it, a creative practice. And I think it would be so much more fun if we think about it that way.
I agree.
Okay, so now I'm excited to see your ideas.
I'm excited too.
You don't have to do them yet, and you may not even have them yet. But when you do, you're going to share them because it is creative of you.
Yes. Business is a creative act.
Okay, let's see. Recap conversation. We started at, I'm going to be an artist. I'm going to do these creative practices. I'm going to listen for nudges. When the time is right. When is the time right? You tell me. I know the answer, but you tell me.
When I'm feeling the nudge.
When you're feeling, well, you're always feeling the nudge. So
Yeah.
go a
A
little
really
deeper.
strong call.
A really strong call that keeps coming back.
Yeah.
Do we still want to give ourselves that constraint of 30 days? I'm okay if you do. I just want to know.
Yes, but less.
Okay.
But I can give myself my solo practice for 30 days.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
been like the generous gift of making the space for that.
I had a mentor once who didn't consider herself creative. Well, maybe she did. She wouldn't call herself a creative, but in order to find her ideas for her business, she would do something like one of those fill in the blank coloring pages, or, something really simple but like meditative, similar to what you're describing, my own personal practice. For her, it wasn't creating something from scratch, but that doesn't matter. But as she was doing that, her best ideas would always come in. So she would flip the page over. Her name is Amber Annette, and write all of her ideas. And by the time she was done with this multi-day coloring page project, she had like a full idea. It was done, complete, had come through, was ready to go. Or had lots of ideas, but she was pretty good at deciphering which ones to use. And I think even giving yourself this time to say, no, I'm not doing anything for my business to make money from it. I'm having my solo practice is still part of the business. I'm seeing it more as like a from start to finish, this is my business routine. I give myself this solo practice time. The ideas come in. I start knowing more and more and more which nudges are the ones I'm ready to follow. And then I can put it out there to be responded to, so I can respond to it, so I can continue evolving the idea that keeps coming back over and over and over.
Yeah. I think for me, it's that refilling the well time. I remember from our conversation a couple years ago, I had my routine to ritual framework, and it was root, ritual, and reveal. And then as we were talking, we were like, oh, there's a fourth. It's rest and restoration. And I've been thinking about that a lot of not only was it something we discovered together, but it's actually become a very intentional part. It was unwritten before. And so I've been in that place, and it's been
Mm-hmm.
helpful just to know that and know that it is part of the cycle, and to know what's coming next and being ready to recognize the shift.
I actually forgot that. This is a nice illustration of what we're talking about. I teach my clients in month cycles. So it's get out there and be seen and have your ideas and play with them. And then it's nurture and like the creation process and la la la. We don't have to get into it too much. And then it's sales. But then I kept feeling like this, I'm not ready to start back over yet. Like there needs to be a period in there. And so now I teach 4-month rotations. And the last one is wrap up, rest, reflect, do whatever you need to do to go inward so you have the energy to
Yeah.
go back outward.
Yeah. And for me, it's a little bit of like finding my path and discovering what my ideas were before, because I have had sort of this punctuated couple of years where I'm giving to lots of different places. And so sometimes those are just kind of resting and I know they're there, but I have to kind of unearth them again. So it's been also this season of unearthing. And so it's not even necessarily new ideas. It's just that uncovering a little bit.
If you want, after this is done, you may or may not, I don't know, have access to the workshop that you taught for me. You might just want to listen to it. I know you know the gist of it, but what did I say? What was I thinking about? What were my ideas? What did I change or come up with? Just to put it in the spinning head container of things so it can spit back out what's important.
Yeah, I watched it in, I think it was October, because I was
Okay.
talking about it again and I was like, "Oh, I said that." It's fun to see, and it was a fun conversation, so I hope people that have your treasury will join us in it, because you always bring the goodness.
So I'm going to include, I asked you where you wanted people to go, and it was to get your emails in Substack. So if they're looking for you on Substack, what's your name?
They can just go to my website, ritualmorningstudio.com, and click over from there.
I'm going to include a link to it in this episode so people can go straight there. But I so enjoyed talking to you.
I enjoyed talking to you always. It's been
Let's do
great.
it more often, not just when we hop on a phone call.
That sounds good.
Okay, good. Didn't you just love Nikkita? Isn't she great? If you love Nikkita as much as I do, you probably want to go grab, if you don't already have, the Artist Market Co. Treasury. Again, I'll put that in the link in the show notes. It's jam-packed full of guest classes that I've hosted in my group and templates and different freebies I've given out over the years, all in one nice little package for $27. But if the Money Now Bootcamp is something that you have been considering, when you join, email me. I'll put my email in the show notes as well. And let me know that you listened to this episode, and I will send you the treasury with Nikkita's masterclass in it for free as a bonus and a thank you for listening. Thank you so much for being here. Talk to you next time.